and mosque, the monasteries. You know, all the so right now Chinese state is supporting all the mosques, all the monasteries in China, um, and 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 this actually would play into kind of the more what we call the radicals in 1990s, because some of these Uyghur I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit.
That's okay.
Some
No,
of
it's
these
it's
Uyghur
following logically with
Mujahideens
me.
who returned from Afghanistan in 1990, they will say, oh, don't go to these state-sanctioned mosques. They take money from the communists. They're tainted. They're not real. They're not preaching Islam. They're preaching like the communist fake version. All these mullahs are state appointed. They're not real mullahs. They're a commie stooge, right? Like, you can't trust them. Don't go to the state-sanctioned mosque. Don't listen to these mullahs. They're trying to feed you communist propaganda, right? So this is how. But that is, yeah. I'm jumping ahead, but that's
No, that's good. That's good. That's good.
this is
That's
where
good.
the
That's
dynamic will come from. But so this is so right now. I mean, the I think the religious policy in terms of the mosque and the state, I think that kind of relationship right in China is kind of there might be a close similarity to how it was done under Soviet Union, right? In the Soviet Union, it was also the state-sanctioned mosque and state-sanctioned mullahs, right? And so some people feel like, oh, these mullahs are just being putting up by the state to regurgitate, kind of state propaganda, and that, so there's that train of thought. But okay, well, I'll let you handle the flow of the.
Yeah, that's fine. No. I like where you're going. It seems to it follows. It's piece by piece. We're getting places. Okay. So I think that's a good description of the experience of the Uyghurs and Xinjiang more broadly in 1949. So you're saying becomes an autonomous region, some of the policies of that, then the nature of the party and the split. So it's how the Sino-Soviet split cut the communist faction within Xinjiang into different camps. And of course, I think that the state-sanctioned mullahs and mosques is actually very interesting. So after the Cultural Revolution, so obviously every religious group being persecuted, so to speak, in the Cultural Revolution. Once that ends, the state supports mosques, particularly in Xinjiang. Okay, and that continues to this day. I think just want to touch on something very lightly. We don't have to go too much into this, but there's a particular thing that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that all minorities in China were exempt from the one-child policy. Is that accurate?
Okay. So there's different versions of that. So when the one-child policy, when it was first rolled out in late 70s, like when I was born, the one-child policy was already being selectively rolled out in different parts of China, and the one-child policy changed over the years. So for example, when I was born, my parents were working in the Tibetan area in western Sichuan. So even though they are Han Chinese, but because they were working in ethnic minority area, they like at that time there's no one-child policy applied to, say, Tibetans, right? But the Han Chinese who work in ethnic Tibetan area, they get to have 2 children. So that's why I was legally conceived. and anyway, so there was that, but that was but the implementation of it was kind of spotty, because when my mom went back to her hometown Chongqing to give birth to me, and the hospital first wouldn't take her because they're like, she's second child. What are you doing? My mom's like, but no. But by policy, we're allowed to have second child because we work in, the Ganzi Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture. And I remember the hospital director's like, what do you mean? That's not part of China? But but at the time, what she didn't know is like the one child policy was applied differently, like was rolled out at differently across. It wasn't like one night that it was
I
the
see.
policy was rolled out all across the country. So, but then in 1990s or 2000, they start to apply like not one child policy, but birth like kind of so before no family planning policy applied to ethnic minorities at all.
Mhm.
But in 2000, for ethnic minority population that's over 10 million, then they have a policy where you can have two kids and three if you are in the rural area. So that there
Okay.
was that. But then it's the rules are kind of, this is China. The rules don't apply kind of evenly because as I mentioned, I went to the Dai and Jinpo Autonomous Prefecture in
Yes.
2019, right? And I was talking to a Dai lady, a friend of a friend. She's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we're just having our second child." So I'm like, "Oh wow, why is this such a large gap between your first and second?" She's like, "Oh, because now the policy relaxed. It would just recently changed this two-child policy." But I'm like, wait! I didn't know the two-child policy applied to the Dai people, and also like the Dai people there's only like 1 million, like
Right.
1 million, like they didn't definitely not over 10 million, but according to her, the one child policy still apply in their locality. So
I
that's
see.
why this is China. This is really
Mm-mm.
depending on the
It's
local
not.
implementation. But in terms of Xinjiang, that one child policy was not applied to the ethnic minority. Like some people might have heard of Rubia Kadir, right? She was made into the chairwoman of the Uyghur Congress, kind of the exile Uyghur organization.
Yeah.
Um, and she had 5 kids. She had 5 kids. So
Okay.
and like so that but I think that is changing recently because now I think they're applying kind of like like I mentioned, 2 kids for urban couples and 3 in the rural area now
Mm.
in Xinjiang as well. That's kind of what I gathered. Yeah.
Okay. 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 I see. So, like you said, it's China's not as monolithic
No.
as many people might think. That there's lots of different policy and how it's implemented and who it affects. It does vary massively. It's not just a broad stroke of policy. Um,
Yeah.
just a quick one then. In terms of minorities, I mean, we've touched on a couple of things here already in terms of what an autonomous region does. So it gives it gives the the minorities language. You can learn that language from kindergarten to university. Um, are there any other measures that sort of protect or even sort of affirmative action
Oh
measures
yeah, yeah, yeah.
give a
Yes.
special status to minorities and to Uyghurs?
Yeah, so there's affirmative action in terms of college entrance exam, right? So as many people know, college entrance exam in China is very highly competitive. I mean, up to like in the 1980s, that back then going like getting accepted to college was almost equivalent of passing the imperial civil service exam back in the dynasty days, right? Because they're just but so for the ethnic minorities, they do have so they have they add points, by they get points for being so there are different point system for like different ethnic minority. Like in the 80s, you could get points for being Manchu or Mongol. But
Uh-huh.
I don't think that applies anymore for Manchu or Mongol or Hui Muslims. They used to, but then there's still uh, like affirmative action for people whose mother tongue is not like Mandarin Chinese, like case of Uyghurs and Tibetans, which makes sense, right? Like so yeah, so there's they get added points for the college entrance exam. That's a pretty well known, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I see. Okay, that's great. No, that's perfect. I think that brings us to the sort of to the gritty stuff, the
Yes.
main thing that we've come here to challenge or to discuss.
We took an
A
hour to
description.
get here, but hopefully we
No, it's
got
good.
enough
I think
background.
well, people can always fast forward,
Yes.
but it's good. I think in our of setting context, explaining different policies, talking about the other Eastern Turkestan republics, you've already answered some of the stuff that we would already be discussing later.
Okay.
And I think we'll also, yeah, this is fine. So yeah, obviously the recent description is that on one hand you have the Chinese government outlines that there's an extremism problem. There's been terrorist attacks that the policies being pursued in Xinjiang, they're actively trying to prevent that. There's something like an ideological problem and re-education camps. And on the other hand, we have others, particularly Western voices, particularly like among Mike Pompeo, describing and declaring genocide. The greatest crime that a state can commit. The most heinous accusation of genocide, of torture, of sterilization. No holds barred. Just really heavy accusation. So what do you think all about this? What do you see
Okay.
there?
So let me just get it out of there before we start. What happened in Xinjiang today, there's no way that can be termed genocide. I mean, this is turned into a very like a political football between kind of the U.S.-China tensions. This is Michael Pompeo's project. He declared genocide on his way out. That was his goal.
Right.
Leave his establish his legacy, quote unquote, and also maybe prepare for his 2024 run. Who knows? For U.S. presidency, and he also left a poison pill in the U.S.-China relations because now it's be harder for the next administration, now the Biden administration, to walk back from that. And we even all these so-called experts that's been quoted, Adrian Zenz, right? He's like the one-man source for all these Xinjiang atrocity reports. Even in his reports, I actually went through the trouble to read every one of his reports. So in his report, he said, well, what happened in Xinjiang is might maybe turn cultural genocide. That's what he called it. He called it cultural genocide. He did not. He was trying to finagle that term. But in the now with Mike Pompeo, declaring genocide, that he just shifted the overtone window in the media talking points. Now like all these media, the CNN, BBC are just kind of throwing this term around very very liberally. I think. It's both unfortunate and it's very I mean like I think it's discredit to real victims of real genocide. To compare what's happening in Xinjiang to say the Holocaust. I'm sorry, that's anti-Semitic. I'm just gonna say it. That's anti-Semitic. We can talk about what's happening in Xinjiang right now. So in the latest reports started in 2017, right? So in 2017, that's when the Chinese government set up these what the Chinese government called vocational training center, / re-education camps. So what they, according to the Chinese government, they are basically people who have been influenced by religious extremism, but the people who have not committed major crimes. So for minor infractions, they will be going to these re-education centers, aka vocational training centers, where they will be educating in the Chinese language, in the Chinese laws, and also the goal was to prepare them, to give them vocational training centers, so they will, once they come out, they will be able to reintegrate into society to find work. So that this is kind of the kind of a comprehensive Chinese government program in Xinjiang to deal with the problem that arose since 1990s. And that's something that's rarely been talked about in the kind of the media frenzy today, is that there was a problem of terrorism in Xinjiang that started particularly in 1990s. I mean, now they trying to, the media try to, Western media trying to glance over that and try to present Xinjiang as like this land of perpetual ethnic conflict that goes back to 1949 even, right? But that's not true. I mean, I look for the statement by these China critics, and I look at what they see and they say and they cross-reference them, right? So one of these so-called Xinjiang expert, Professor James Millward from George Washington, he you can find a clip of him on YouTube saying back in 1990s, when he was studying in Urumqi, when he was studying in Xinjiang, he said the ethnic relationship between Han Chinese and Uyghurs were amicable in late 80s and early 90s, at least up to the time that he was there, when he was on the ground observing. Right now, he's all on this genocide bandwagon, but he said back, several years ago, I think the clip is still on YouTube. He said back in 90s, the relationship
amicable.
The amicable, right? So I mean, one of the narrative that was being spun. What do you need? Oh, one of the narrative. My wife is reminding me to drink water. Thank you.
No, that's good. Yeah. No, sure.
Yeah.
Take a sip of water. No.
So one of the narrative also that's being fed in Western media is that because there is a massive settlement of Han Chinese into Xinjiang, that's the source of ethnic conflict, right? So to which I'll point out kind of the demographic spread in Xinjiang didn't change much from 1960s, right? 1960s when Mao started sending in a lot of the Han Chinese youth, and also as a result of famine refugees going to Xinjiang. But from 1960s, 70s till today, the kind of spread is constant. It's about 40% Han Chinese. Now there's a little bit fewer because some Han Chinese were leaving Xinjiang because of the instability in the last few years. But and also like the 46% Uyghur divide that has been since 1960s, 1970s. And then we have the American professor James Millward said back in 1980s, 1990s, ethnic relationship were good, were amicable.
Right.
So what they don't explain is really what happened. What happened after 90s.
So I think you might have mentioned this earlier, so you can take a sip of water as well.
Okay. So
yes. So I just is that yes, as you said, the narrative being painted now is that there's a huge influx of Han, and all the Han have just arrived in the last 5 years or something like that, and it's really just overwhelmed. It's an invasion of the Han into Xinjiang, that they've never been there, and it's a very recent thing. So that's the one narrative I think that you've already addressed, that's not valid, that at least since the 1960s, and with the demobilization of the soldiers after 1949, that there's been a steady Han population, and it's stayed at the same level as it is now. You mentioned earlier that the Mujahideen, so coming out of Afghanistan, out of the war with the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and the CIA and Western-backed Mujahideen forces, that they played some role, or might have played some role, in the emergence of the, I suppose, fundamentalism into Xinjiang.
Yes. So, I mentioned earlier about the Sino-Soviet split, right? So that had long-term consequences, one of which was kind of the rapprochement between U.S. and China. It was the Nixon visit in China in 1972. and then also as part of that, there was also the China-India conflict in 1960s, which Soviet sided with India, and then so China got together with Pakistan after the China-Indian War, and then in 1979, well, throughout 1970s, U.S. CIA were involved with Pakistan to destabilize the communist government of Afghanistan, right? And so that led to 1979 Soviet invasion, and at this time, by 1979, China was kind of de facto in the Western camp, in the anti-Soviet camp. So, so U.S. CIA had at the time, China just finished constructing a Karakoram highway, which connects Xinjiang with Pakistan, and then also as end of the Cultural Revolution, the rules were relaxed, the border control were relaxed, so goods and people start flowing across the borders again. And also at this time, CIA was participating in Operation Cyclone, which was its largest project before the most recent Syrian war effort, the Operation Sycamore. So Operation Cyclone for Afghanistan at that time was the largest CIA undertaking with Saudi Arabia, with Pakistan, trying to stabilize Afghanistan and to fight the Soviets. And at that time, there was an interesting story about, because the CIA, they didn't want to supply the Mujahideens with American weapons because they don't want to be traced. I mean, it's obvious, but still, they want to. So they purchased a lot of the Chinese weapons from China because at that time the Chinese weapons are kind of just like replica of the Soviet models. So it would be it's kind of the Eastern Bloc weapons, harder to trace. So they were buying the Chinese-made AK-47s to supply to the Afghan Mujahideens, and all of these weapons were coming over, either on ports to Pakistan ports of Karachi or through overland route through Xinjiang through Karakoram Highway. And then CIA, they needed mules to transport them, transport the weapons and Mujahideens into Afghanistan because there's very limited road in Afghanistan. And at first they tried to supply Afghan Mujahideens with Tennessee mules. This is probably some U.S. senators' pet project. But the Tennessee mules, they couldn't hack the Afghan weather. The climate was too harsh. So all these American mules were dying in mass. And so then the CIA went to China. They went to they purchased a lot of mules and donkeys from Xinjiang next door over, right? Because the climate was similar. So they sourced a lot of mules and donkeys from Xinjiang to carry these Chinese-made weapons for Afghan Mujahideens into Afghanistan. And at that time, there was, CIA even had a listening station in Xinjiang throughout 1980s to spy on the Soviet nuclear tests in Kazakhstan. And U.S. Embassy acknowledged that in like 2000s. I don't think it's still operational today, but back in 1980s. And then, but as I mentioned earlier, because the borders are relaxed, people are traveling abroad again. Some young Uyghur people, they were traveling to Pakistan for study, for jobs. But some of them ended up on the border area between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And that's where CIA and in collaboration with Saudi Arabia, they were setting up this series of madrasas, kind of the religious schools, to indoctrinate all the Afghan refugees and their children in the kind of the Saudi version of Islam, the Wahhabi Islam. Yes. So and then for people who might not aware, Central Asia traditionally practice a very different brand of Islam. Like, so Sufism in Central Asia involve a lot of shrine worship. There's like shrine to saints everywhere, right? And one of the earlier conflict between like the Arab Mujahideens in Afghanistan was they were blowing up all these saints' tombs because they say that's idol worship. So
Right.
they're blowing up all these the tombs of Islamic saints all over, and initially that caused a big conflict, but in the end, because Saudis they had the money, they had these madrasas brainwashing the next generation, so that kind of became more accepted. That's how later we get to the Taliban, but then some of these Uyghur youth they ended up in these madrasas and they become
Yes.
radicalized. And some Uyghurs even went over to Afghanistan to join the Mujahideens to fight the Soviets. But the Soviet, as end of Cold War was drawing close, Soviet withdrew from Afghanistan, I think in 1989 or 1990. And
89. Yeah.
yeah, so and then Afghanistan became kind of free fall among the various Western-backed warlords and the communist government in Kabul. And at that time, 1990 is when there's some Uyghur Mujahideen started coming back to China. As I mentioned earlier, I left China in 1990, in fact, October of 1990. But I still remember while I was in China, in early part of 1990, I think I have to check. It's in spring of 1990, so it's either like between February and March, I think, or maybe April. There was called the Baran incident in this county in the Kashgar prefecture in Xinjiang, where these these returning Mujahideens from Afghanistan, they try to stage an insurrection, with a secret weapon cache, and attack government installations. And so they were, that was the first major serious outbreak of violence, political violence in Xinjiang.
I see.
And then, as I alluded to earlier, in up to 1990s, the ethnic relationship between the Han and the Uyghur population was still amicable in Xinjiang, and to the
Yes.
rest of us in China at that time, in state media, we mostly see just like Uyghur people were presented as these happy dancing people. So we all know like Uyghur people know how to dance, so they love to dance. Anyway, that's kind of the Chinese state media for you. So
Okay.
there's like if there's stereotype about Uyghur people in China back then, it would be so-called positive stereotype, right? So like, oh, Uyghur people they're great at singing and dancing. And then in 1990 something changed is Chinese economy, because China started marketing reform in 1980s.
Yes.
But Xinjiang economy is still very much centralized command economy throughout 1980s. They're kind of, because they're so far inland, the market reform reached them late, right? So, but it did reach them in 1990s, and before, as I mentioned, you can choose to go to either the Uyghur only schools, or you can choose the Mandarin track. It doesn't really matter what language you speak, because after you graduate, the state assign you a job, right? In 1980s, hey, stop fighting, my dogs.
It's okay. That's okay. Don't worry. No problem.
So like back in 1980s, the state pays your tuition to go to college, but after you graduate, the state assign you a job. Right, so it doesn't really matter. You speak Mandarin Chinese, you speak Uyghur, you are guaranteed a job, right? It doesn't matter. But 1990s is when, with the market reform, the Xinjiang economy. Hey, stop it, stop fighting. The Xinjiang economy started to be transformed from a socialist command economy with more with more market elements, right? A lot of private entrepreneurs were allowed to flourish, and that's when kind of the divide from the economic sense, between the Han and the Uyghur in Xinjiang start to emerge because for the Han Chinese in Xinjiang, they have they already speak the language. Most of them speak Mandarin Chinese, and many of them have family connections with other parts of China where there have been factories in the coast being set up for export, making toys and shoes for
Right.
US and Americans. And it's a lot easier for them to source the goods, right? Because if they have the family connection for
Right.
resale in Xinjiang. So the economic divide start to appear between the Hans and the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. And on top of that, there was also, hey, sit down. There's also a lot of social problems that was introduced by the initial phase of liberalization because I remember in 1980, like it was kind of experimental phase. Like now with all the social control that were gone from Cultural Revolution, people are experimenting different things.
Right.
The borders were opened up. There was a lot of smuggling. There was a lot of drugs because Afghanistan started to become the world's largest production base of opium and heroin, right? Some of the opium and heroin started to filter back into Xinjiang, and Xinjiang had a drug problem in the 1990s, and so there's smuggling, there's drugs, and prostitution started to appearing. Like Mao kind of now like put a stop on prostitution when People's Republic of China was established in 1949. But in 1980s, with the liberal market reform, liberalization, underground prostitution started to appearing. There was also like a problem with alcoholism. So a lot of this returning mujahideens, they start preaching. They try to attack from the social sector. Like preaching people shouldn't drink, they shouldn't smoke, they shouldn't do drugs, they shouldn't go visit prostitute. I mean, all the good things, right? All the good things.
Right.
So they start to gaining grounds at the grassroots level, right?
I see.
But what happened is once they reach a critical mass in the villages, now they're starting to put on more. They start to carry out more their agendas, right? So now they're saying, you should cover up your wife, because in Xinjiang was very secular in 1980s and before, because as I mentioned, Xinjiang has a lot of Soviet influence, right? So it took its fashion tips from Soviet Central Asia, and Soviet Central Asia was very secular. So Xinjiang up to 1980s was very secular. You're not gonna see veiled women, right, on the streets. But in 1990s, they're like, okay, look, we came from Afghanistan. Like the state preachers, those mosques in the state sanctioned mosques, those mullahs, they're not preaching real Islam, right? These mullahs are communist stooge. They're regurgitating communist propaganda. We brought you the true Islam from the Arab fighters we met in Afghanistan. This is the true Islam from the place of Mecca and Medina, right? And you should listen to us. Don't go to the state-sanctioned mosque. Don't participate in anything the communist state related. So that's Tengchu, right? Because if you get married, don't go to the civil. Don't register your marriage with the civil government, because you're gonna taint yourself with the communist. You just come to us. We will pronounce nikah, and then you're married, right? And so they started to start taking over on like grassroots level. At this time, also, the Chinese government at this time in 1980s, 1990s, they're primarily focused on the economy, right? They're not noticing all these things. Undercurrent was kind of bubbling underneath, and another 1997, that was one big blow up in Yining, or in Uyghur called Kuja, in the northwestern part of Xinjiang. So 1997, a bunch of these radicals, these former mujahideens, they got arrested, right? They got arrested. So they stage a huge protest to demand their release in Yining, and a huge state, and that protest soon deteriorated into a general rioting, and they start uh, attacking just Han Chinese civilians on the streets,
Ordinary
and
people.
yeah, and so that the Yining incident in 1997, that's when it became more serious. Before like 1990, Barren incident was still kind of small, isolated in a rural Kashgar, right? But Yining
Right.
was a big city, and that's what was a big thing. And then in two, so there was also also the Uyghur Mujahideens who were still outside of China. They formed their own jihadi group called first it was called the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, East Turkestan ETIM. So China put them on the terror list, and in fact, United States actually put them on terror list after
Really?
2001. Yeah, ETIM.
Okay.
Pompeo just took them off the terror list before he left office. Yes, he
Well,
took
just a few
ETIM.
months before he went off.
Yes, yes, just recently, a
Okay.
few months ago.
I see. I see.
But the ETIM, they actually work very closely with Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, and the leader of ETIM, they now they're renaming themselves Turkestan Islamic Party. So the head of the Turkestan Islamic Party is this guy called Abdul Haq. He was originally from Xinjiang, and he was so embedded with Al Qaeda that he sits on the High Shura Council of Al Qaeda. Yes, he was the inner
So he
circle.
was
He
he
was
was basically on the top level command of Al Qaeda.
yes, yes.
Okay.
So in this guy, U.S. actually claimed they killed him in 2000 in some. Or it's no, maybe not U.S. Maybe Pakistan claimed he was killed in a raid in 2000, but he just recently emerged around the Syrian war. And in fact, during the Syrian war, the the Turkestan Islamic Party, they were mobilizing people from Xinjiang to go leave China to travel to Syria to fight the jihad,
Mm,
against Assad. And,
mm.
and and if people search articles, they will find a lot of stories about detained Uyghur quote unquote refugees in places like Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and this is because I'm skipping ahead a little bit because I need to
That's
talk
okay.
about 2009 Urumqi riot, because up to so through 1990s there was kind of this low burn um,
Yeah.
flash spots. There was a couple bombings on the buses on Urumqi, but it was still largely restricted within Xinjiang. And then, in 2009, so couple things happened in 2009. So Chinese government decided, okay, maybe all this problem in Xinjiang is a result of poverty. They believe, from the Marxist point of view, they believe everything is uh,
Economic.
is
Has an
economy.
economic
It's
basis. Yes.
economic, right? It's economic. It's economically based. So the problem is that they feel that they just need to develop Xinjiang more. So they start to pour more resource into Xinjiang. So one is infrastructure development. They build a railroad to Kashgar, and then the second thing they did was, okay, so they say, well, if there's no industry in Xinjiang, we'll bring the Uyghur people to the coastal factories, because even till very recently, 80% of the Uyghur population still engaged in subsistence agriculture, and
Mm.
background of that is the Uyghur population actually quadrupled since 1949. Like in 1949, there was about like 3.5 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Today, there's like 11, 12 million. We don't know. The last census was taken last nationwide census was taken in 2010. So the 2020 census is going to come out soon, if it not come out already, so we can check. So it's either 11 or 12 million Uyghur now. So, but as I mentioned before, most of the rural Uyghurs, farming families that live in these oasis towns on the edge of the Taklamakan Desert, the world's
Yeah.
second largest moving sand desert. So the arable land is limited. You know, these
Right.
oases, uh, they were being fed by the glacial runoff from the Tianshan Mountains. But when your population has quadrupled, and with most of the people uh, still depending on subsistence agriculture, there's a lot of youth unemployment problem in rural
Mm.
Xinjiang, particularly in the southern Xinjiang. So one of the track that Chinese government applied was they organized because also there's a language barrier, as I mentioned before. Before they could be educated all through college in Uyghur only. So at this in the early 2000s, there were still many Uyghurs in Xinjiang, especially in the southern Xinjiang, more rural
Mm.
part of Xinjiang, that do not speak Mandarin Chinese, right? They're only conversant in Uyghur. So the Chinese government decided what is going to be like they have to intervene to organize the Uyghur laborers to go to the coastal factories. And so they will give like tax breaks uh, and various incentives for the factory owners to hire Uyghurs from
Mm.
Xinjiang. And then like around 2000, I remember seeing articles from like Radio Free Asia, the CIA
Mm.
cutout,
Right. Right.
was saying, oh, raising all kind of objections to the Chinese labor transfer program. They were saying, like a lot of the religious conservative parents were afraid their daughters will, their virginal daughters will be corrupted by the Han culture. They will maybe have premarital sex while they're away from home.
Mm.
They may even
Mm.
be like marry Han Chinese
Very
men.
Chinese.
Like so like they were already circulating these kind of
Mm.
either rumors or exaggerating people's concerns. And then 2008 is a great financial crisis that happened. So
Right.
that affected a lot of the export of a lot of the factories set up for export along the Chinese coast. But at this time, Chinese government was still bringing in the Uyghur laborers from Xinjiang, right? So that created some discontent among the Han, uh, some of the Han Chinese workforce that were working in those
Yeah.
factories. Some labor. So in 2009, I remember this because I watched this unfold online. I was very, very online. And I saw
Right.
somebody posted in a Chinese forum saying, oh, Han Chinese girl accidentally went to the Uyghur dormitory in one of the factory in Guangdong, in Shaoguan, and the claim was she was gang raped, and then the authority is trying to hush up because they're trying to protect their policy of sending Uyghurs into Guangdong, right? So they're claiming the government is trying to cover up this incident. So that post went viral on the Chinese social media at the time. Also, by the way, in 2009, none of the Western social media platforms were banned in China yet. So
Okay.
Twitter,
This is all.
YouTube, Facebook, that was all available. So anyway, so at that time, the rumors spread like wildfire, and then a couple hours later, I saw the update. There was a large mob gathered outside the Uyghur dormitory in the factory, and
Right.
thousands of these laid off workers, they stormed the Uyghur dormitory
And
and started.
these were hand laid off workers that stormed.
Yes, yes. So they stormed the Uyghur dormitory, and then there was a massive brawl, and two young Uyghur men were killed in the fight. So this was a Saoguang incident in early part of 2009, and
Mm.
at that time, a lot of the Uyghur diaspora overseas organization, they started to create their own rumors to feed back in Xinjiang through Facebook, through other social media. They're claiming it's the Uyghurs women who were sent over to work in the factory. They were being gang raped and killed by these Han Chinese men, and so there was a large protest gathered in Urumqi on June 5th, 2009, outside of the Urumqi provincial government. But at the time they were demanding the Chinese government to prosecute the perpetrators, right? This was actually right around the time when this incident just happened, right? The perpetrator was there was actually an investigation into what happened in Shaoguang. So according to the report that on CCTV, it was a laid off worker who felt disgruntled, who spread this rumor online, and he was actually arrested and tried for causing social disturbances, and as well as a group of ringleaders who organized the mob, and what at the time the chairman of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, the Uyghur chairman, he explained what happened. He said, "Well, yeah, this Han Chinese girl, he went inside the dormitory to look for her boyfriend, but she accidentally wandered into the Uyghur side, and there were so there was a group of young Uyghur men. They teased her, and she just freaked out and she screamed. So that's what happened. That's what triggered it. She screamed, she rang out. That was the end. But some people heard the scream. They kind of exaggerated the story online. They claim she was gang raped, and the Chinese government is trying to cover up, which led to the whole blow up, whole kind of race riot that happened. This story was the rumors, internet rumor mills were fermenting, and they were being fed back into Xinjiang by the various Uyghur exile organization based in Berlin, based in Washington. A large crowd gathered to protest outside of the Xinjiang provincial government on July 5th.
July 5th.
But the provincial government was walled off by riot police, so they couldn't enter. They couldn't get close. So what happened next is the crowd turned around and went into the surrounding neighborhood. Then they start to attack any Han Chinese they could find, and this was the evening rush hour. So a lot of that part of the neighborhood, that was on the transit route for a lot of the workers who were just leaving work, going home. So they would stop buses on the street, and they will pull off the Han Chinese from the bus and start beating them on the street. The violence lasted the whole day and whole night. I think the Xinjiang provincial government was caught off guard. They didn't expect this level of violence to break out. So there was, I was trying to read the expat account who were in Urumqi, in Xinjiang at the time. So I was looking, because I don't fully trust news report. Even Chinese government state media report, I feel like they put filters on that. So I try to find first person eyewitness account. So at the time, all the blogs were open. I was searching for all the expat blogs to find out what happened. So people were getting confused. There was rioting on the streets. There was no, police was not seen. I think they're just the Xinjiang government just wasn't prepared, and there was actually one. I found the blog of this one Chinese American dude who was studying in Urumqi University at the time. So he was learning the Uyghur language for a couple of years. So he has some sort of fluency, and he could also pass for Uyghur because his mother is white. So he's mixed, so he has that. He looks Central Asian, yeah, because he's Eurasian look. He looks Central Asian. So he was caught outside that night on the July 5th. He was approached by a group of people, demanding to know who he is. So to save his life, he claimed he know his Uyghur is still not local fluent.
Right.
So he claimed he's a overseas Uzbek who is returning to visit Xinjiang. right? And then they let him go. But as the crowd was leaving, one of the young Uyghur man very helpfully told him, "It's like, man, don't tell people you are Uzbek. You know, we don't like Uzbeks either. So just just yeah, just say you are overseas Uyghur, you'll be fine."
Yeah.
So he got out that, you know, very much frightened, but got out with his life. And at the end, there were about 197 people killed. You know, most of them
Right.
Chinese. But they were also attacking like unveiled women on the streets, like you know the Uyghur women who they thought dressed too slutty. That was
Right.
also a target.
Right.
Um, you can actually find the surveillance videos on YouTube. Like if you search Urumqi June 5th riot videos, you'll see like I saw a couple of videos where they have uh, have a group of people. They're stopping the bus. They're pulling people off the bus and beating them on the pavement. And there's
Mhm,
like a couple of like women covered completely in burqa.
mhm.
They were also beating people on the ground with sticks.
I
It's
see.
kind of very brutal stuff.
Sounds
And
very intense. Yeah.
yeah, and so 197 people were killed. Over 2,000 people were injured. And it's I
Mm,
read various accounts. You know, many people think there was some sort of organization. It wasn't just a spontaneous riot. There
mm,
was some organization behind it because, the again, I read all the dissidents and all the you know China critics to make to for cross referencing. So one of the guy who was arrested after July 7th was this Uyghur journalist
mhm.
who was like he was from a family of the Uyghur communist family, so he was pretty higher up. But he
Mm.
spoke to Yazhou Zoukan or the Asian Journal in a newspaper based in Hong Kong about the incident soon afterwards. What he said, he thinks the Urumqi riot was organized uh, by this jihadi organization that was based outside of Xinjiang, and he said by all accounts the violence was organized. There was some kind of
Was
organization.
it
Yeah.
was it the ETIM, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement?
Um, the name he gave, I'm pulling a blank here. It's Hizbur something something. I don't have a notes in front of me, so I am just pulling straight from my memory.
Okay.
I
No,
can
no.
look it up and send it to you later. But
Sure.
I do believe the Turkestan Islamic Party, or back then East Turkestan Islamic Movement, did claim some sort of a responsibility for that. They claim responsibility for all the attacks, almost all the attacks inside Xinjiang, and uh, and that was a big watershed moment between kind
Mm,
of the ethnic relationship between
mm,
Han and the
mm,
Uyghur in Xinjiang. I mean, I just from online, I noticed suddenly the attitude changed, the hardening
mm,
attitude,
mm.
because there was after that there was a brief there was an organized kind of a kind of let me finish with the narrative.
Sure.
Yeah, I do believe there's some kind of organization because one day after the CCTV, the Chinese Central Television crew went into Urumqi to cover what happened, and one of their van got ambushed. One of their van got attacked. So I do believe that that's probably not just spontaneous
Mm,
violence.
mm, mm,
And
mm.
and and the you know so for one day the provincial government, I think they were paralyzed. They didn't know what to do. And there was some people were speculating, you know, maybe the Xinjiang provincial government, they don't have the authority to order the police to open fire or and anyway, it took a whole day, and on July 5th, no, July 7th. So 2 days after, the Han Chinese in Urumqi start to organize like a counter mob. They wanted to go like on revenge attack against the Uyghur neighborhood. Now it's going to be like a full ethnic war, right?
Race war, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but at this time, luckily, after 2 days, finally the people's armed police arrived into Urumqi. So they went in just in time to stop the Han mob from going into the Uyghur neighborhood. And I remember I was watching this all online, right? And I was a lot of the Han Chinese in Xinjiang. They were actually angry. They felt like the government was taking on the wrong side. They felt like the government was trying to take the Uyghur side, but the government is just trying to stop a race war. That's what. So and this right after that, that's when Xinjiang had an internet lockdown. So Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, everything was banned. Xinjiang was offline. Xinjiang was offline for a whole year because the Chinese government they wanted to stop kind of the internet rumor mill from spreading to inflame the already very tense ethnic
tensions.
Yeah. And that's when like a lot of the crackdown started after 2009 because also there was a lot of migrant workers from southern Xinjiang, from the rural southern Xinjiang, going to Urumqi for work at this time. The Urumqi government after 2009, they decided they're going to send all these people home. So they start to enforce hukou, the resident permit system. In China, in all the Chinese cities, they have this hukou system, right? You have to have the resident permit to be able to send your children to school, get government benefits, etc. And so they like I say, in China, the policy, how it implements it, it really depends on the locality and the government. So in 2009, that's when the city government of Urumqi decided to actually enforce the hukou policies. They decided to send all the migrant workers, Uyghur migrant workers home. There was a slum area outside of Xinjiang, outside of Urumqi, that was mostly populated by the migrant workers from the south. So they were all sent home, and then that's when like the strict security was put in place. A lot of checkpoints started to go up in Xinjiang, in malls, on the streets, very heightened sense of security, and then but the tax didn't stop. I mean the Urumqi, the tax just fanned out from Urumqi into other parts.
So more ethnic violence, more clashes.
There's more clashes. So is particularly around the time of between 2012 and 2014. So there was an attack actually in Tiananmen Square. A group of Uyghurs drove a van onto Tiananmen Square to try to run down all the pedestrians. And then they set the van on fire, hoping to blow up the van. They end up killing themselves when the van burned, but they also killed several people when the van was running amok. Because Tiananmen Square gets very crowded, especially on national holidays. And then there was also a follow-up bombing Urumqi for farmers market. So the group of people again driving cars into the Han Chinese section of Urumqi. They start tossing homemade bombs into the vegetable sellers and the crowd. And also in 2014, there was a time when Xi Jinping went to visit Xinjiang for inspection. So to coincide with that, they set off a bomb in Urumqi train station. And for that attack, I know the Turkestan Islamic Party claimed responsibility because I saw their propaganda videos where they claimed responsibility for that. And because they actually show all the footage of the assemblage of the bomb and the actual then they use the Chinese media's play of the actual bombing
Explosion, yeah.
footage. Yeah. So, and but that was aside from the Beijing Tiananmen Square bombing. That was still mostly happening in Xinjiang, right? There was actually around 2008 Olympics. There was also a Uyghur girl who was arrested. She brought a bomb onto a flight that was going from Xinjiang to Beijing, and she was stopped. And then in 2014, March 1st, 2014. So I talk about this Uyghurs being organized to go to Syria, right? So
Yes,
I want to go back to that. This is going
no
to be
problem.
repeated because Syria